So let's start officially. I will introduce in Italian, we'll speak mainly in Italian, then I'll say a few words in English, because the main participants are mainly from Italy, but we have also some participants from UK and USA. So I'll switch to Italian, then next to English. Benvenuti a tutti, grazie a Chanfor International per aver organizzato e per ospitare questo webinar che si intitola La sfida dell'alt text, generare immagini accessibili, lo stato attuale e le possibilità future. Questo sarà un aggiornamento per professionisti dell'accessibilità, editori, bibliotecari interessati all'accessibilità, no? Nel linguaggio del web il termine alt indica appunto una descrizione alternativa ed è utile per agevolare la lettura da parte di screen reader, cioè di quei dispositivi utilizzati da persone ipovedenti o con gravi problemi di vista che identificano il testo sul computer e lo riproducono attraverso una sintesi vocale o un display braille. La funzione dell'alt text è proprio quella di descrivere che cosa è illustrato in una foto nel testo e non un semplice copia e incolla della didascalia. In questo webinar affronteremo argomenti chiave come gli elementi essenziali del testo alternativo, l'importanza delle didascalie descrittive e l'uso delle tecnologie assistite dall'intelligenza artificiale per migliorare l'accessibilità ai contenuti. Saranno presi anche in considerazione vantaggi e svantaggi in discussione oggi presso la comunità degli esperti riguardo all'adozione dell'intelligenza artificiale generativa nella descrizione delle immagini. Chanfor ha raggruppato me e altri esperti nell'alveo delle sue iniziative sull'accessibilità che segue da più di 10 anni. Questo webinar, come vedete, è registrato, vi verrà inviata la registrazione, potrà essere richiesto un attestato di partecipazione a lauralentini@chanfor.net. Io sono Nicola Cavalli, sono il direttore editoriale di Ledizioni, Business Development Manager per Media Library Online, MLOL, e membro eletto del Consiglio dei piccoli editori dell'Associazione appunto italiana editori. Gli interventi dei relatori che adesso andrò a presentarvi saranno in inglese e in italiano. Sono stati attivati i sottotitoli a questo webinar in modo da aiutarvi a seguire le presentazioni in inglese per chi è madrelingua italiano. Quindi non c'è una traduzione simultanea. Se poi avete dubbi, domande, vi preghiamo di scriverle in chat e avremo dello spazio per delle domande alla fine di ogni intervento e se rimarrà un po' di tempo anche per una piccola discussione alla fine. I switch just briefly to English. Thank you everybody for attending this webinar organized by Chanfor International. Chanfor is an Italian company who provides goods, services, digital services to Italian libraries, both university, academic library, firm libraries, and other kind of libraries. And is active in the field of accessibility since more than 10 years, and has organized this webinar that focuses mainly on alternative text and how generative artificial intelligence might help in generating and in generating alternative text and in dealing with accessibility issues. We have today with us Stacy Scott, who is responsible for accessibility for the UK publisher Taylor & Francis. Hi, Stacy. Thank you for joining us. We will have then Gregorio Pellegrino, who is Chief Accessibility Officer at Fondazione in Milan. and is also a member of various groups at the W3C regarding accessibility. And we will then have Phill Barrett from, I don't know how to say, ICTech, probably Intelligent Content Solution, is a company represented by Chamfor in Italy, who provides services and solution for accessibility for publisher and libraries. Non ho fatto la presentazione dei relatori in italiano, la ripeto rapidamente. Avremo con noi Stacy Scott, che ringrazio, responsabile dell'accessibilità per l'editore Taylor & Francis. Stacy è non vedente ed è co-presidente attualmente del Consiglio Diversity, Equity and Inclusion di Taylor & Francis e co-leader del gruppo Disability, Accessibility and Neurodiversity, sempre per l'editore Taylor & Francis, e anche co-leader dell'All Information Limited Disability Colleague Network, ed è inoltre presidente del Publishing Accessibility Action Group, PAAG. Gregorio Pellegrino, responsabile tecnico, c'è solo in inglese, Chief Accessibility Officer della Fondazione Italia, ed è attivo in diversi working group del W3C, che riguardano l'accessibilità. Abbiamo poi con noi Phill Barrett di ICTech Intelligent Content Solutions, un'azienda rappresentata da Chamfor in Italia, attiva appunto nella fornitura di servizi e soluzioni per l'accessibilità a biblioteche e case editrici. Non rubo ulteriore tempo e lascio la parola a Stacy Scott con il suo intervento. So, thank you, Stacy. I leave the floor to you, and please consider roughly 15 minutes for your speech. Thank you for attending.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone, especially for taking the time to join the webinar during your lunch hour. I applaud you, thank you, and apologies, I won't be speaking any Italian because it would just be embarrassing for me. So I will speak in English, thank you. So first, I think it's important to talk about what are image descriptions, because I think, you know, some people think it's obvious, it's a description of an image, but actually there are a few elements to that. So it's an umbrella term. So let's unpack some of the aspects to that. So first of all, we have alt text, a short description that you would add to any image, diagram, chart, graph. Long description would be added to more complex images, so what we call STEM imagery, so science, technology, engineering, maths, or medicine. The difference between alt text and long description: alt text is not visible. It is used by people using text to speech, and so it's not seen. Long descriptions are typically longer, hence long description, and can often be seen by those reading the printed book. Hence, they're usually put in an appendix or somewhere of the publisher's choosing. We also have decorative images. So these are essentially images that don't add any value or translate any information, say on a web page or in a book. They're there for decoration and quite often don't need to be described. Captions versus alt text. So a caption for an image might say something like, you know, welcome to a webinar on alt text. What you don't want to do is repeat a caption if you're writing alt text, but you don't want to rely on that caption either for describing an image. So always be aware if you have a caption that A, your alt text does not duplicate that caption, but B, you're not relying on that caption to describe an image if indeed it doesn't do that, because a caption is not a description. So moving on to why is it important to describe our images? And so there are actually a few answers to this. So firstly, looking at the social impact, the good, the why should we do it? Who do described images support? So they're typically used by people who can't see or interpret images. So people in this category, like me, people who use text-to-speech. So text-to-speech is, again, what it says on the tin, as we say. It is text. It's keyboard-based input. So you do not use a mouse. You use the keyboard to operate a computer. Whether or not you're in internet, email, Microsoft products, Apple products, it reads aloud to you everything that's on the screen. In my own life experience as a text-to-speech user, I studied mathematics, and when I studied it, we didn't really have alt text, we didn't have image descriptions, and so my experience with mathematics without these descriptions was interesting, shall we say, and challenging. So I would go into exams with plasticine, coins, pipe cleaners, bits of straw, in order to create and feel the graphs that I needed to interact with. So we've stepped a little beyond that now, which is fantastic. And image descriptions goes a long way to making subjects, whether it's for education, whether it's in employment or entertainment, it brings those subjects to life for people like me and makes sure that everyone has an inclusive experience. Secondly, compliance with legislation and standards. So looking at, for example, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the European Accessibilities Act, which comes into force next June. That is an EU directive that aims to remove barriers between disabled consumers and private companies. It's aligned with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines by the World Wide Web Consortium. Only by adding image descriptions can you comply with aspects such as the EAA, European Accessibility Act, and the WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines standards. Because without image descriptions, you can have the most beautifully formatted document, but if your images aren't described, that document is not fully accessible to someone, and therefore you will not comply with many legislatives and standards. The third reason for doing it, if we needed a third reason, is what we call in the UK the purple pound. So purple is the power of disability. It's a powerful colour. It symbolises disability. And when we talk about the purple pound, we're talking about the spending power of people with disabilities, driving revenues, a business incentive for adding image descriptions to your content. So if we consider that 15% of the global population is now considered to have a disability, that is a huge number of people. And so by not making your content fully accessible by adding image descriptions, you are missing out a huge number of people, a large number of customers, people that would spend their money with you as a publisher or a creator, but may choose to do otherwise if they can't access all aspects of that. And so we talked about the reasons why. Where are image descriptions going in the future? And I think that's a really exciting topic, and it's going to be covered more in this session today. Adding image descriptions, in addition to having the benefit to people and to your business, it makes content more machine readable, discoverable, and excitingly, AI ready. So ready for artificial intelligence. I'm not going to go into that now because Gregorio is going to talk about that next. But absolutely, AI, I would say, is the future. But I would caution not to leave the engine running. Don't let AI do 100% of the work. It needs to be checked. We're not yet in a place where we're all in driverless cars. One day, we will be, but not quite yet. So we've talked about the what and the why, but what about the how? What are some of the key ways to get image descriptions into your content? So firstly, looking at personas and understanding the needs of your consumers and customers. For publishers, vendors, authors, and other content creators, creating a how-to hub is really important. So including what is the best way to create image descriptions? What are they? Who uses them? How do we create them? Adding adding samples is a really powerful way of supporting people as well, because writing good alt text or good long description is a skill. And some people possess it naturally, some people don't, and some people need that support. So giving as many examples across a broad range of subjects is really helpful. And we've certainly found that at Taylor & Francis with our hub in supporting our authors to supply some of that alt text. Ensuring that you have somebody to check your descriptions, somebody who's going to benefit from them, listening to them by ear. Does your alt text or long description genuinely convey the image? Using subject matter experts, again, this ties in with the artificial intelligence point, making sure that particularly for subjects that are more complex like maths, science, and indeed medicine, having those subject matter experts check the alt text or long description is absolutely crucial. And on the topic of subject matter experts, it's always important to understand that your end users are some of your most important subject matter experts. They, again, will be the ones using your image descriptions. Using text-to-speech software is a skill. Navigating a complicated book or website with magnification is a skill. Reading with dyslexia, dyspraxia, and a whole host of other what we call print disabilities comes with its own set of skills. And so again, developing the personas and having end user testing is so important if you're developing image descriptions. So who should be writing the alt text? Whose alt text is better? This is always such an interesting question. And actually, there's no one size fits all approach to this. Depending on your needs, it could be produced externally by a vendor or independent contractor / supplier. It could be done in-house by editorial or production, or it could be done by the author themselves, the subject matter experts. And so sometimes, as in Taylor & Francis, a combination of all three is the best solution. But it very much depends on your workflow, the size of your organization, and, dare I say, your resources. So sometimes, as I say, a mixture of the above is the most appropriate method. But the two most important factors, in my view, one, the image description is fit for purpose, and two, it has been checked by a subject matter expert where necessary. So as mentioned, in your health and social science subjects, this might not always be necessary, but I would say that in science, engineering, technology, maths, and medicine, it most probably is always necessary. And I know some people don't want to hear that because it's more resources, but it is much better to provide good image description than, as I said, to leave the engine running and produce, tick all the boxes. All of our books have image descriptions, but if none of them are actually fit for purpose, you're boiling water that you're standing in. It's not going to go well later on down the line. And it's not good for your customers either. So in conclusion, image description is absolutely necessary for a vast and growing number of consumers. There are many good reasons for adding image descriptions, as we've talked about. There are many resources to help guide you in this area. So do your research, choose which path works best for you and your organization, but most importantly, engage, as you're doing now by watching this webinar, and ask questions, join groups. The accessibility community in publishing is so strong, and I would say very friendly. So please make sure that you're having those conversations, because when I do these webinars, I learn something every single time from the other speakers. And so I hope you have done as well. Thank you so much for listening to me. I will hand back.
Thank you, Stacy. Many thanks for your speech. It was, I would say, the definitive speech on what alt text is, why it is important, and how to do it, to achieve it. So many thanks. Really, it was very clear speech and very informative.
Thank you.
Allora c'è tempo, se avete delle domande vi invito a farle in chat. Come appunto avete sentito, è stato un intervento molto chiaro, molto puntuale sulla differenza intanto fra le didascalie e che cos'è l'alt text, il senso dell'alt text, perché è importante sviluppare e creare nelle proprie pubblicazioni accessibili degli alt text, delle descrizioni delle immagini che siano pensate per i fruitori ipovedenti, ha dato anche delle strategie su come raggiungere questi obiettivi, evidenziando in particolare l'importanza di sia parlare con la comunità di riferimento a cui queste descrizioni alternative sono rivolte, sia ipotizzando appunto anche diversi modalità per gli editori di raggiungere questi obiettivi con fornitori esterni, con gli editori interni, con gli autori, con degli esperti della materia. Quindi veramente vi consiglio di prestare, insomma, anche di rivedere questo intervento, perché è veramente un ottimo assunto in un quarto d'ora del perché le descrizioni alternative delle immagini sono importanti. Non vedo domande in chat, poi avete ancora tempo anche probabilmente di fare la fine, però aspettate, prima che stavo passando la parola a Gregorio Pellegrino, c'è una domanda credo rivolta a Stacy che possiamo farle. Stacy, just a question for you. Do you have experience of libraries writing the alt text with the help of users with disabilities, as for instance, trainees or interns?
So I don't have a lot of direct experience, but I know that this does happen. So I quite often will sort of will meet with a group of librarian accessibility support staff every few months to update them on what we're doing. And so, yes, they absolutely will quite often just write the alt text themselves where a publisher has not provided it. But obviously, it takes a lot of resources for them. And so the ideal is that it's already supplied by the publisher. But yes, there are many librarians who write alt text to support their students.
Thank you, Stacy. That's very interesting because we can also think about a cooperation between libraries and publishers also. So regarding creating alternative description could be an interesting field of cooperation.
Yes.
Camilla Notarbato says that she's also thinking of alternative text also on their internet website, because of course.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
perfect.
We are mainly talking about publications, so EPUBs mainly, digital publications, but it's also very important to think that alternative texts are also directly on the web, on websites.
Yes, and in all your social media content.
And also on the social media content, right. Grazie. Do adesso la parola a Gregorio Pellegrino, come dicevo, Chief Accessibility Officer per la Fondazione Italia, libri italiani accessibili, fondazione dell'Associazione Italiana Editori e dell'Unione Italiana Ciechi, che ha da poco compiuto 10 anni, che si occupa appunto da più di 10 anni ormai di accessibilità ed è un'eccellenza italiana riconosciuta a livello europeo ed internazionale. Prego Gregorio.
Grazie. Vado in italiano con la presentazione? Sì.
Ero in dubbio su che cosa tu volessi fare. You can do it half in Italian, half in English. So.
Ok, le slide sono in italiano, quindi switcherò. Allora, grazie dell'introduzione. Fondazione Lia è, come diceva Nicola, una fondazione nata dall'Unione Italiana Ciechi e Ipovedenti e dall'Associazione Italiana Editori. È un'organizzazione quindi un po' particolare perché racchiude i due estremi della filiera dell'editoria digitale accessibile: chi produce i contenuti e dovrebbe produrli accessibili e chi ne deve fruire, quindi gli utenti finali. Anche a livello internazionale questa tipologia di convergenza degli enti non è così, non è molto utilizzata. E questo ci permette di avere da una parte le conoscenze approfondite del modo di lavorare degli editori, quindi dei processi produttivi, dei software che vengono utilizzati, e dall'altra parte conoscere molto bene e da vicino le esigenze degli utenti finali. All'interno della Fondazione abbiamo altri due enti che partecipano e sono soci molto importanti. Uno è l'Associazione Italiana Dislessia e l'altra è la Biblioteca Italiana per i Ciechi di Monza, che è l'ente che si occupa di trasformare molti libri cartacei in braille cartaceo, che si occupa di fare molti lavori sui testi scolastici, è uno dei punti di riferimento della comunità non vedenti in Italia. Il mio lavoro in Fondazione LIA è quello di Chief Accessibility Officer, è un ruolo che abbiamo inventato e che indica il seguire tutti gli aspetti tecnici dell'accessibilità. Il mio background è da ingegnere informatico, nasco da genitori che hanno fondato una casa editrice, quindi questi due aspetti, e partecipando ai diversi gruppi di lavoro internazionali che definiscono gli standard, mi sono occupato della stesura di alcune specifiche, che sono le specifiche che vengono adesso adottate per la creazione di ebook accessibili, in particolare le EPUB Accessibility 1.1, che è il documento che definisce come fare un EPUB accessibile, e poi le User Experience Guide for Displaying Accessibility Metadata, che è un documento che spiega come mostrare i metadati di accessibilità. Vedremo tra poco quanto i metadati di accessibilità sono importanti nella filiera. E infine un documento importante che identifica quali sono i requisiti dello European Accessibility Act che sono soddisfatti dagli standard EPUB. Fin dal suo inizio, la Fondazione ha lavorato all'interno di un network internazionali di organizzazioni non profit che si occupano della definizione degli standard tecnici. Questo perché siamo convinti che i contenuti digitali accessibili potranno essere sviluppati in numero sostanziale solo quando i produttori di contenuti, gli editori, integreranno le funzionalità di accessibilità dentro i loro normali processi di lavoro. Quindi non come un lavoro ex post di conversione, dopo che è stato fatto un ebook o un libro si fa la versione accessibile, ma prevedere fin dall'inizio che la versione creata per tutti sia anche accessibile. Per far questo, quando siamo partiti, gli standard non erano pronti. E quindi lavorando con i diversi enti siamo riusciti a creare tutti i diversi tasselli per assicurarci che l'editore abbia la possibilità completa di produrre un ebook accessibile, oltre naturalmente a formare gli editori su come fare questo lavoro. Lavoriamo quindi con istituzioni, con aziende pubbliche e private, con le organizzazioni internazionali che definiscono gli standard, con gli utenti finali e quindi i lettori con delle disabilità dalla lettura a stampa e con chi crea i contenuti. Chiudo l'introduzione sulla Fondazione con questa slide che per noi è molto importante. Per noi l'accessibilità non è solo una questione di produrre contenuti accessibili, produrre ebook accessibili, quello è fondamentale, ma tutta l'esperienza dell'utente deve essere accessibile. Quindi mettendoci nei panni di una persona che ha difficoltà di vista o difficoltà con la lettura dei libri a stampa, questa persona deve essere in grado di andare su un sito web di una biblioteca o un e-commerce e cercare un libro, capire se quel libro soddisfa le proprie necessità e quindi avere dei metadati che descrivano le caratteristiche di accessibilità dei libri. Riuscire a prendere in prestito l'ebook o il libro oppure ad acquistarlo tramite un processo accessibile. Avere un software per il controllo della pirateria, si chiamano DRM, questi software, che non blocchi l'accessibilità, e così infine riuscire a leggere l'ebook accessibile all'interno di un'interfaccia, di un'applicazione di lettura accessibile. Vedete quindi come, partendo dall'utente finale, facendo a ritroso tutta la catena del lavoro, vediamo che ogni attore coinvolto, dalla piattaforma che distribuisce i contenuti al sistema per il pagamento, per il prestito, al il distributore che distribuisce i file, all'editore che li produce, deve tenere in conto l'accessibilità. Ecco allora che il focus della Fondazione è proprio sull'ecosistema digitale accessibile. Per questo lavoriamo con i diversi attori per oliare bene il sistema e fare in modo che l'esperienza sia accessibile. Ok, adesso passo in inglese sulla parte centrale del mio intervento, che è quello sulle descrizioni alternative in editoria. So I'm switching to English on alternative description for publishing. So as Stacy already said, the most well-used authoring tools for producing ebooks are able to incorporate alternative text within their code, meaning you can associate an alternative text with every image present in ebook. This is possible in Microsoft Word, it's possible in Adobe InDesign, it's possible in most of the authoring tools used by publishers. So we have no excuse. We have to produce our ebooks with alternative text for images. But producing alternative text is something that is quite complex in the workflow of a publishing house, and it's also quite expensive in terms of time. Is a time expensive activity, and so of cost. As Stacy said, it's not very clear who is responsible for producing the alt text within a publishing house, if it's the author or the editor or the typesetter. So it's really quite difficult. And the other thing is that in publishing, we don't have just photographs as images, but we have a wide range of different kind of images that are present in ebooks. In this slide, you can see just 6 different examples of different kind of figures, images present in ebooks. There is a photograph, an illustration, a screenshot of a chart, of a diagram, and then we have a pile diagram, a bar chart. We have a comic book with some comics, and then we have an infographics. And as you can imagine, trying to describe these images is really different from one kind of image to the other, but also thinking about the audience who will read the book. If the book is for children, you need to use a specific language. If it's for adults, you can use another language. If it's a scientific book, you will focus on more numbers and scientific figures, while if it's general trade, you may leave those things. That's why in Fondazione Lia, we started exploring the use of AI and machine learning for helping publishers to speed up the work of producing alternative text since 2018. So 5 years ago, before the big hype on the generative AI, we as Fondazione Lia presented a research project done in collaboration with the University of Siena, where we test some tools that were available at that time for labeling images that we thought may help in producing alt text. At that time, those tools were quite good in describing photographs because they were trained on a lot of photographs out of the web or out of social networks, but they were not so good in describing all the other kind of images present in books like maps, charts, logos, covers, and so on. In fact, the accuracy of that project was not that bad 5 years ago, but it was not as good as a software that can go in production. It was 50%. So in 50% of the images we processed, the description was pretty good, while in the 50% of the images was not good at all. So after that project, we did another research trying to categorize different kind of images present in books. That was an interesting research made by my colleague Chiara. And we found out 25 different categories of images that can be present in a book, from images of text, signatures, diagrams, flags, posters, screenshots, complex images, and then we have tables, we have illustrations, and so on. And for each of these type of images, we also create a taxonomy for describing in a closed dictionary the characteristic of these images. And this work has been really, really important for the new project that we started last year, that is called Alt GPT, with the idea of using generative AI for producing alternative text. The interesting thing of generative AI is that you can pass to the technology both the image plus some text. For example, you can pass the image plus the surrounding text, the contextual text. This work has been done with the University of Roma Tor Vergata, and what we are doing now is trying different services available, GPT-4, Claude, other services like that, to find out which is the best solution for each kind of images, because we think that there is no one solution that can fit all descriptions, and we think that different services may have different capabilities in describing images. So the idea is to find the best service for each type of images. We still have some challenges, and I'm closing my speech, because producing the alt text is not the same thing of creating a caption, as Stacy said, and those generative AI systems don't really have the idea what is an alternative text. So we have to explain them before asking them to produce it. Also, the alternative text really depends on the context in which the image is inserted, to the public to which the publication is meant for, and also to guidelines from the publisher. So it's not only something that can be generated automatically. And the generative AI tools available right now are not really meant for creating alternative text. So we think that a human in the loop is always important, something that can review the alternative description produced by the tool, to fix it, to change some small things, to check that everything is okay, as Stacy suggests. But we also have some questions, and we would like to explore more if the AI can help not only in producing alternative text, but in producing another kind of descriptions. Then I don't think we have the time to dig into it right now, which are the extended description, which are kind of extending explanations to images, specifically for complex images, charts, and things like that. Okay, I think I've done, so I'm open to questions from the audience.
Grazie mille a Gregorio Pellegrino, che vedo che ha superato brillantemente il tranello dell'intervento in doppia lingua. Così credo che sia i nostri ospiti anglofoni siano riusciti a seguire, ma anche gli italiani, visto che le slide erano in italiano. Se c'è qualche domanda la potete fare subito adesso in chat oppure tenerla per la fine. Insomma, è stato ben chiarito diciamo, in ideale prosecuzione dell'intervento di Stacy precedente, alcuni appunti appunto del processo di creazione delle descrizioni alternative, per cui ad esempio è chiaro come per quanto l'intelligenza artificiale generativa sia promettente, per ora appunto è fondamentale che ci sia un processo di revisione umana del materiale prodotto anche attraverso queste tecniche di intelligenza artificiale generativa. C'è una domanda. Quando pensate di presentare i risultati del processo al GPT?
Nell'autunno di quest'anno.
Quindi insomma, diamo già un appuntamento per delle presentazioni a questo autunno. Bene, so I think we can move on to our next speaker, Phill Barrett from IC Tech Intelligence Content Solution in the UK. Phill, come vi dicevo, appunto ha una lunga carriera nel settore dell'editoria digitale, parte insomma dall'epoca dei CD-ROM per poi arrivare insomma a XML, HTML e internet. È un esperto di XML e anche di come rendere il contenuto accessibile. So I leave the stage to you, Phill, with your speech, Make Accessibility Accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Just to check, can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to present this morning for me. I'm coming from the perspective really of a vendor in this industry, and there are many vendors out there now who are already involved in accessibility, and we're one of them, but we work closely with publishers. And so really what I'm saying here is some considerations that that we found from the perspective of a vendor, people selling technology surrounding accessibility, and where we consult in that type of thing, but also some reflections, if you like, or questions or statements that we're finding that are coming from our customers. And a number of them, Gregorio and Stacy, have already addressed some of the issues around where is it important for accessibility to start, what about metadata, what about schemas, etc., etc. So I may be wrong in some of the assertions, but that's the whole point really. They need to be challenged. So here we go. Quick introduction. IC Tech, thank you, Nicola, for the great pronunciation of it. It's always a difficult thing, but people then tend to remember it. So what do? So we founded in 2008, and we provide document workflow solutions, as it says there, using intelligent content. What's intelligent content? Well, it's everything from structured content, from metadata, from highly styled content to accessibility content. It's using technology to make sure that content can get through the content lifecycle, and as Stacy said, to the consumer, and they're the important people who is using this content, and can we make it better for them. Actually, just one thing, we focus mainly on using Microsoft Word as a platform, as well as obviously the internet and all things AI. So what am I saying by making accessibility accessible? So again, just a few statements. We see most content created is created in Word, maybe web content, ebooks. We see lots and lots of static content, print, PDF, PowerPoint, and it's not always accessible, and especially the huge amount of old content that's out there. And so we are saying, sorry, let me just hide thumbnails. So we make the assertion that accessibility should be built as early as possible in the content lifecycle. This new content, ideally, and we've coined the phrase "born accessible" rather than added later as part of a workflow. The reason we try and make that point, certainly when we are consulting, is that if we're using AI, which I'll come on to later on, what we're starting to see is that, in fact, creating alt text, long descriptions, whatever, using AI can actually add work into the content lifecycle for publishers, especially at the editorial stage or typesetting stage. And that's because more and more checks have to be done because it's not been written by a human, as Stacy said. It needs to be checked by experts in that area, subject matter experts, etc. So it needs to be thought through more than just saying, okay, well, we'll just use AI and create alternative text. It can be useful, as I've said, in editorial stages where publishers are looking to reduce time to consumer. But as I've said, it can also add more steps in those life cycles. You'll see emerging vendors like ourselves who are creating technology around the website, around what's more and more becoming more and more important, and that's around APIs. More and more, we're seeing that our customers are saying, look, we don't need a user interface. We just need a way of supplying something to AI and getting something back. And in this case, it happens to be alt text, maybe long descriptions. And that's the way that they're consuming that technology, rather than either desktop or SaaS or whatever. So APIs become more and more important, and that starts to address this: how is accessibility and creating accessible content accessible in that sense? So as Stacy said, who are the consumers of accessible? Keep asking, keep making sure that that content is relevant, is right, or it'll make things worse. So forgive the promotion here, but we've created an intelligent content server for ATLD, and as I've said here, talking to the accessibility or how accessible this technology is, we've made it as integratable as possible via APIs. So that content server can create meaningful ATLD for images. We can also take in full documents that contain images, and we can generate it for specific needs, which I'll show you just in a minute. So as I've said, for images, Word documents, PDF, it's cloud-based, it's thoroughly API driven. And we're also looking at R&D at the moment for automated tagging, which is something that I'm sure Gregorio is interested in as well. Taking common schemas that we're involved with, many of you may know, in tech docs, for example, DITA, very popular in journals. So JATS is something that we're working with, all the way through to any structured content where there's the consumer may have different needs than just a piece of paper or a printed PDF. So we provide, we're talking here about the born accessible documents, where we provide accessibility tags and metadata in the early stages of the workflow. So this is for authors, editors, and other stakeholders. Traditionally, we're working by adding to Microsoft Word, which is, as I've said, tends to be where most content is created. And in doing so, we're focused on both the desktop version and the new 365 version of Word, which will become Word at some point. So repeating myself a little bit, but we're as a vendor, we're looking at tagging in the early stages of the workflow in all of those schemas that we've just said. But also it goes a bit deeper than that, and within those documents we help with automated compliance checks and that type of thing. So and just as an example, again, I'm trying not to be I'm trying for this not to be a sales position, but we're selling to people in the US, like the Department of Defense, but our main customers are in the publishing area. So just as a quick example here, please take this as an example or a skin, if you like, to the set of APIs. This is just logging in to a system to start creating ATLD. Here's an example now that just confirms the type of thing that has been talked about, certainly Gregorio mentioned. So here's an example of how you can upload an image or a file. You can enter a caption for it. Key thing here is describing the target audience, and then the target language. And then from that, I hope you can see here's just an example result. And you can see that it's come back as a default. It could be that the, as mentioned before, it could be that the target audience was for a child. And then generated alt text, an existing alt text is seen there. And you can keep going through there, and you can download the document if you like when you've finished. So if it was a Word document that you'd used, the Word document would then be downloadable containing the alt text. I think, again, I must say that I'm not a massive proponent of this way of doing things, but it's a start. Most of the time we're hearing from publishers that AI provides the impetus, the help, some tips to being able to create content, but they're not relying at all on the just straightforward generated alt text or generated content at all. So I'm really careful when I do speak about this to make sure and reiterate that previous speakers have said you need to have people checking these things. So there is a question there as to how actually important it is that we can use it as I say, as a prompt rather than a definitive piece of content. So again, just the sort of things that we're working on. We hear a lot from publishers now that long descriptions are difficult to get as a table. So where you might have a table as an image, very often the text that comes back might not be another table. So we're looking at that. We're looking at how we can incorporate our content server into other vendors, other partners. We're looking at the concept of, how can we get authors and editors as upstream as possible to be thinking about AI and alt text. So finally, as a vendor, we partner with other large services, and we do lots of collaborative work with publishers. We would tend to do consultation on specific areas where we optimize publishers' workflows. And the reason that's in there is because clearly at the moment, most of our conversations will ultimately be talking about how we can optimize the speed that content can get to the consumer, but also, of course, the subject of this discussion, which is around alt text for those people whose needs are greater than perhaps our own. Thank you. That's me done. So I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Phill, for your speech. It was very interesting, and your solution looks really promising. Laura Garbolino was asking that she has seen the output of the alternative text you have generated, but she has not seen the image from which you started. So
okay.
if you can just briefly show it.
Probably not easily
No,
and quickly
okay.
on this, but we can certainly exchange email addresses with pleasure, and we can show anybody who wants to see it. I'm not here to sell. I know that's not the purpose of this, but if you want a non-sales look at this, we'll do that with pleasure.
Perfetto, quindi Laura poi magari facciamo seguire una descrizione, solo facciamo vedere esattamente che cos'era e possiamo andare ancora più in dettaglio. Se c'è ancora qualche domanda, sono esattamente le 13, quindi in realtà abbiamo fatto perfettamente in tempo, in un'ora. Se c'è qualche domanda è il momento di farla, sia per Phill che per Stacy che per Gregorio. Io nel frattempo ringrazio ancora Cenfor per aver organizzato questo webinar, che credo sia stato molto, molto interessante, si è vista anche appunto dall'ampia partecipazione anche internazionale. Insomma, il tema è sicuramente di attualità, come diceva Phill, ci sono diversi fornitori, diverse soluzioni che si stanno affacciando sul mercato per provare ad automatizzare, grazie all'intelligenza artificiale, questo processo di creazione delle descrizioni alternative, piuttosto che anche di tanti altri elementi che rendono una pubblicazione accessibile. In realtà abbiamo visto come insomma, non solo le pubblicazioni, anche se qua ci siamo concentrati su libri digitali, gli ebook, in EPUB, principalmente in EPUB ma anche in PDF, per rendere accessibili, ma anche appunto l'accessibilità delle applicazioni, dei siti web, appunto come diceva giustamente Gregorio, diciamo, il customer journey, quindi completo, che sia completamente accessibile. Quindi diciamo che è stato sicuramente un'ora molto utile che ci ha fatto capire dove si sta andando in questo settore. Direi di chiudere con questa domanda rivolta a Gregorio. Se ci dà qualche dettaglio in più sulle sperimentazioni con l'intelligenza artificiale, per quanto riguarda le problematiche, per quanto riguarda le problematiche diverse, invece poi, e questa è la domanda di Pier Giovanna Grossi, invece di Laura Garbolino, se insomma, cosa bolle in pentola sui grafici con le funzioni matematiche, se Gregorio ha qualcosa da commentare su questo tema.
Certo, allora, come vi dicevo, stiamo riscontrando che alcuni tool performano meglio su alcune immagini, altri tool su altre immagini, ed è in questo incrocio dove si sta andando a concentrare la nostra ricerca, basata su dei punteggi e su delle valutazioni dei tool. Quindi questo è il lavoro principale che stiamo svolgendo in questo momento. Le sfide non sono poche. La prima è far intendere chiaramente che cos'è una descrizione alternativa, cosa ci aspettiamo che il tool dia in output, e su questo stiamo testando diversi prompt, si chiamano, diverse richieste da fare al tool. La seconda sfida è il fatto che spesso queste descrizioni alternative prodotte sono molto lunghe, sono molto verbose, mentre una buona norma del testo alternativo è che sia breve e che cerchi di spiegare in poche parole di che cosa si tratta. La terza cosa su cui abbiamo visto dei miglioramenti significativi del sistema e la pertinenza rispetto al contenuto in cui è inserito. Passando al sistema che deve generare il testo alternativo, oltre al testo alternativo, oltre all'immagine, passare il testo, il contesto in cui l'immagine è inserita, quindi parte del testo in cui è inserita, questo spesso aiuta molto a dare una descrizione alternativa coerente. La sfida che abbiamo ancora e su cui stiamo facendo ricerca è quella dell'audience, e quindi di riuscire ad avere un testo che sia adeguato ai diverse tipologie di pubblico. E un'altra, che forse non è molto nota perché veniamo tutti da lingue abbastanza adottate, l'italiano e l'inglese, ma quando questi strumenti li si vuole utilizzare su lingue poco diffuse, pensiamo a lingue come il lituano, lo slovacco, il ceco e così via, ecco che questi modelli di generative AI sono molto più deboli e quindi è difficile ottenere descrizioni alternative per lingue poco diffuse. Questo è. Sulla questione dei grafici, delle immagini, quindi immagini con grafici di funzioni matematiche, la sfida non è solo sull'intelligenza artificiale, ma è una sfida in generale, cioè come rendere l'andamento di una funzione matematica ad una persona che non riesce a visualizzare il grafico. Ci sono diversi approcci molto sperimentali, di standardizzato non c'è nulla al momento. Un approccio è quello della sonificazione del grafico, quindi di ascoltare con un suono che diventa più acuto o più grave in base a come l'onda si muove, come il grafico si muove come la curva si muove sul grafico, ascoltare come il suono del grafico. Questo però funziona solo con funzioni molto semplici e solo se è presente una sola funzione sul grafico, quindi è una soluzione ma è limitata. Spesso si offre come extended description, ciò di cui parlavamo prima, una tabella contenente alcuni punti salienti, quindi le coordinate x, y dei punti salienti del grafico, così che una persona non vedente possa farsi un'idea dell'andamento della curva attraverso l'incrocio dei punti x, y. Questa è un'altra soluzione. Diciamo che non c'è una soluzione generale, ma appunto non è tanto una questione di intelligenza artificiale che non si è ancora individuato neanche con un lavoro manuale di editing come produrre queste descrizioni. Non so, magari su questo Stacy vuole aggiungere qualcosa. Stacy, I don't know if you want to add something. I was explaining, there is a question about how to make alternative description or extended description for complex graphs of mathematical functions. And I was telling that sonification is one of the possibilities, even if it's really research and development. And sometimes there is the use of tables for expressing some of the points that are touched by the curves. I don't know, since you are producing quite a lot of STEM content, if you have any suggestion on describing this kind of graphs.
I think what you've said is absolutely correct. I think the other thing is, I think this is where subject matter experts, both experts in mathematics and the creation of the content, but also the end users need to come together on this, because it's so important to be able to convey that information correctly and understand that it is being received correctly. And so I think we could do a whole different webinar, couldn't we, on accessing mathematical, image description. But I think your point, and just making sure that you have that choice of subject matter expert and persons at the end.
Grazie, thank you Stacy, grazie Gregorio. Secondo abbiamo già il tema per il prossimo webinar, quindi sui contenuti, sulle formule matematiche, contenuti matematici. Avrei dovuto farlo all'inizio, me ne scuso in primo luogo con il relatore. In programma avrete visto che era previsto anche Sean Beaver di Pneuma Solution, che purtroppo non è stato presente, non ha potuto essere presente. In ogni caso, appunto, insieme alla registrazione e alle altre presentazioni, vi verrà comunque inviata la presentazione relativa allo speech che Sean Beaver aveva preparato per voi, in modo che possiate comunque accedere ai contenuti e alle informazioni che avrebbe condiviso. Poi comunque per tutte le informazioni su Pneuma Solution e sulla sua offerta, sulle sue soluzioni, Cenfor rimane a disposizione. We still have two questions, or at least one or two questions. One from John Ackroyd. I don't know, John, for whom was the question exactly. So I read it in English and also in Italian. So Stacy, Phill, or Gregorio, let's just fight for whom is going to answer. So John was asking if for bulk collection, for example, library archives, is something better than nothing, or is better to wait until artificial intelligence systems are more efficient? No, per le raccolte massive, quindi ad esempio gli archivi delle biblioteche, se è meglio fare con l'intelligenza artificiale così come è adesso o aspettare che siano più efficienti.
Well, my position is that something is better than nothing at the moment, but bear in mind that for bulk collections, the technology to do so image to long text, for example, isn't particularly fast. So John, that's where, you know, waiting, it could become more efficient in terms of the speed. But again, it all comes back to if you do bulk and it comes back maybe 65, 75% okay, how do the end users consume that? How is that good enough for those end users? That's my position, or one position.
I would say that, and I would agree with Phill, I think that where we are at with like artificial intelligence for image description is actually quite advanced. I've been researching this quite a lot recently. And so, for example, we had the Aurora Borealis that most of us were privileged to see recently. So I took a picture of this and I ran it through an AI to image description engine, and it produced a phenomenal description in 12 seconds.
Yeah.
And actually, if somebody was to sit down and write that description, I don't think they could have done a better job, and it certainly would have taken a lot more time.
Yeah.
And so we've touched on this before. Don't leave the engine running, as I say. Don't just let AI loose on your content, on your backlist, without checking it. But I believe that where we are at with AI image description now, it does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So even if as a starting point, you can finesse it. But I would say it is worth using now.
So thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Phill. So actually, there is something that is better than nothing. So, quindi credo che appunto il commento di entrambi era appunto che c'è sicuramente necessità di rivedere ciò che si ottiene dall'intelligenza artificiale, però la potenza di questi sistemi già attualmente può essere utile utilizzarla appunto con una supervisione umana. A meno di miei errori, di cose che mi stiano sfuggendo, non vedo altre domande o mani alzate. Se quindi non abbiamo più altre curiosità, rinnovo e domande. Io rinnovo i miei ringraziamenti a Cenfor, allo staff di Cenfor, a Laura Lentini, a Enzo Rimedio, ad Anna Merlo. Ringrazio Stacy Scott, Gregorio Pellegrino, and Phill Barrett. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Phill, for attending.
Pleasure.
Vi ringrazio a nome mio, sono Nicola Cavalli, vi ringrazio per la partecipazione e per lo scambio e le informazioni veramente utili ed interessanti. Come vi dicevamo, entro qualche giorno vi verranno inviati tutti i materiali e Laura Lentini, laura.lentini@cenfor.net è a disposizione per le richieste degli attestati di partecipazione. Grazie ancora e alla prossima. Arrivederci.